So, as James very helpfully introduced as we arrived at church this morning, we are here today to talk to you about opening doors. The Opening Doors is the name that we give to our building project, so we thought it would be really helpful to share with you where we began and where we're going. So we're going to have a bit of Q&A where I'm going to grill James a little bit about our project. So my first question, James, today is, the Opening Doors project, where did it all begin? What was the start? How did we get where we are?
Thank you. I think that the easiest way to start is to say the project started 12 years ago, which feels like a very long time ago. And when I looked back when I was doing 12 years ago, I was still in my curacy, which feels like a very long time ago. Many things have happened since then. And it started with the faithful people here in St Cuthbert's, and a few who are no longer with us now, who developed this amazing vision for St Cuthbert's building. And the vision came out of, in many senses, the drawbacks of our building. Many of them you will know. We have a very imposing entrance. We have some incredibly steep steps as you enter. There are no toilets in the building, as you know. There's a lack of space, a way we can host concerts or events. And from there came a vision to open up our doors to our community, to enable organisations in the music and art sector and even businesses to be able to take advantage of the amazing acoustics and, I would say, aura of this building. So our architect was commissioned to draw up plans of what this might look like and how we might be able to use our building to put the soul back into the heart of Darlington, as someone coined that phrase for me recently. So 12 years ago, we developed plans to take out the pews, to move the font from the south transept to near the west door, to change the entrance lobby to be much less imposing and much more attractive for those looking in from the outside, and to make our entrance accessible for everyone, and to put in some wonderful heating, to put in some toilets, and to put in a server. So this was not my idea. This was the idea of the faithful people of St Cuthbert's a decade ago, and it's one that we have pursued ever since.
So it started quite a long time ago then, 12 years ago. I don't know if any of you are thinking what my next question might be, but why has it taken us 12 years to get to where we are now? What's been happening?
It's a brilliant question. I think fundamentally the answer to your question lies in what so many people outside the church think of when they think of church. They think of the church roof. That's what many people think of when they think of the church. We discovered that 3 of our roofs were highly defective. So much so that we were put on the Heritage at Risk register. Because fundamentally, there wasn't much point in transforming the inside of our building if we weren't watertight. So 2 significant roofing projects began in 2014 and 2018, which cost £500,000 to repair, and we also threw in a new boiler the year before as well.
So when did you arrive, and what was the next stage for you when you did get here, James?
Well, in the sequence of roofs, I arrived after 2 had been repaired, and as you may know, we repaired the last one last year, in 2024. I arrived here in St Cuthbert's back in April 2021, just as we as a church were coming out of COVID, and we were just starting to have in-person services here at St Cuthbert's.
So in that time, James, you arrived, and then St Cuthbert's, as some of us will know, was designated a resourcing church by the diocese. So when did that happen?
There was initial conversations about this back in 2019, but they didn't really come to much. And then the diocese started having conversations with me about 3 months after I arrived, and it became a reality in October 2022.
But for those of us that are not familiar with that term, what does it mean then for them to designate St Cuthbert's as a resourcing church with you as leader here?
They are such simple but really, really important questions. I think in its simplest terms, a resourcing church is where a church is given more resources. That's how we can employ staff here at St Cuthbert's, so that we can revitalise St Cuthbert's. We can get growing as a church again. That's both a numerical thing, that's also in our discipleship and what it means to follow Jesus. And then ultimately, down the line, we hope to be able to resource others in Darlington and in the diocese. So it's a little bit like a financial investment would be, as you might understand it. You invest something into St Cuthbert's, but you always expect a return as a result, don't you? Same thing.
But that's a lot about people and resource and finance of people. So what impact does it have being a resourcing church on our opening doors building projects?
Ah, yes, very important, thank you. As part of the resources we were given as St Cuthbert's, we were given a large grant towards our Opening Doors building project. But I think I want to say something else happened as well at that time. Because my job here as leader of St Cuthbert's became to revitalise the church, to get it growing again. And we started to see the building project in light of this bigger vision that we started to develop as a church. And we developed a vision all about transformation that I know many of you will be familiar with. About transforming us as people, about transforming our building, and about being part of transforming the town of Darlington. And if we are to achieve a revitalised St Cuthbert's, then transforming our building becomes a pivotal to this whole thing. Because a new, accessible, flexible space will be key to our mission as a church. Will be key to inviting the people of Darlington in. Will be key to using our glorious building to point to our glorious God. So in many senses, 12 years ago we started with a vision for our building. But most recently, that's been developed into a vision for our church.
That's really exciting to hear the journey that we've been on so far. We've still got more to say about what is going to come. But I wonder, James, as we think about how exciting this is, where do you feel God has been within all of this?
That's a brilliant question, and it's really important that we bring it back to God. Ever since the Resourcing Church thing kind of came about, I felt that God wanted to take us as a church on a journey, or perhaps needed to take us on a journey if we were to get growing as a church again. And I was drawn to the passage from Joshua that we heard earlier. I preached on it way back in May 2023, so that's over 2 years ago. And I felt like God was saying that we were like the people of Israel in the Old Testament. We were camped on the banks of the Jordan River, and God was asking us to cross the river into a new and prosperous land. But in that story, crossing the river took courage for the Old Testament people of Israel. They had to trust God, and they had to trust their leader, Joshua. They had to consecrate themselves. We read that earlier. And they had to make sure they didn't repeat the mistakes of the past. The people of Israel found themselves an extra 40 years in the wilderness because of some of their past mistakes. I felt like God was saying to us, just like he said to Joshua, be courageous, for the Lord your God is with you. So cross the river into a new land. And I think that is what we've been doing for the past 2 years. We have been crossing the Jordan. And the people of Israel were only able to cross the river if they allowed the presence of God, the Ark of the Covenant as it was for them, to go for them. That's why we talk a lot about prayer here in St Cuthbert's, because we know that God must go before us. And I think that's at the root of our story.
That's the first sermon I heard. I arrived the week after that sermon was preached. I've still got a copy of it if anyone wanted to read it. But I think I've got to ask James, have we crossed the Jordan? Like, are we at the other side of the river, do you think, metaphorically here at St. Cuthbert's?
That is a question way beyond my pay grade, I think. And my instinct says we are still crossing the river. And the Opening Doors project is, I think, is part of that crossing. Maybe when we complete the building work, then that will signal that all the people have crossed the river and will join in with Miriam's song, who knows. But transforming our building is part of our vision, and that feels pivotal to the journey that we're on.
So let's take us back to some practical questions around the Opening Doors project. How much does a project like this cost? And what is our funding plan?
Thank you. The Church of England, when they invested, made us a resourcing church, gave us a very, very generous grant of £1 million. The project back in June last year was billed to cost £1.7 million. And our plan was of raising the extra 700,000 was from a lottery grant, was from the government VAT scheme, and from a number of organisations who are grant-making trusts, and also from inviting the community to be able to contribute to the project as well.
That's a lot of money, and we're not going to stay there with those figures, I'm sure, because a lot of hard work went into that fundraising. Do you remember when you told us that we had some setbacks late last year? So what happened then?
We did indeed have some setbacks. Back in December, the project cost increased by £300,000, and then in February, the government all but in name scrapped its VAT rebate scheme, which put us back another £275,000. So now the project cost is £2.3 million.
So we went from needing 1.7 to 2.3 million. So where does that leave us today? Where are we at?
In the last 6 months, we've made some really, really important and good and bold strides since those setbacks. The Church of England has offered to cover the cost of the VAT scheme and a little bit more, which we're very grateful for. We're applying for a second lottery grant, but that has hit some snags, so we're not quite sure of that. And we have since submitted over £200,000 worth of applications to grant-making trusts. And we got some really good news from one of those last week. So we feel that we have made significant progress. We still need another kind of 200, maybe £250,000, but we do have a plan to bring that money in, and we think it's possible. So the PCC, a couple of weeks ago, made a decision to go ahead with the project with a starting date of January 2026.
So this is really significant. I'm just going to repeat that. So the PCC have agreed to go ahead with the project as of January 2026. And in some ways we're stepping forward in faith, James, because we still need that extra £200,000 to £300,000. It's really, really exciting. It's really, really significant. And of course, the projects are going to make big changes for us here at St. Cuthbert's. Probably one of our biggest changes for over a century.